Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're doing well. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the kit that I used when I was out traveling. For those of you who don't know, my name's Lucas. I'm a filmmaker and photographer based here in the UK, but for the last 3 months, I've been traveling around Southeast Asia, Australia, and New Zealand, and it was the most amazing trip. I thought today I'd talk a little bit about the kit that I used to capture that content over the last 3 months. It's a small, compact kit with a few key items that I think could be used in an everyday kit, but they essentially work really well for travel. You might notice that this video looks a little bit different to my regular videos, and that's because I'm filming on my iPhone 11, which I know isn't the greatest camera in the world, but we're going to work with it today because I've got my main camera here, which I'm going to talk about in just a sec. So yeah, just bear with the slightly different image quality. Before I dive into talking about the kit that is in this kit, I actually want to talk about the kit that's not in this kit that you might think might come into a travel filmmaker's kit. The first thing I decided not to bring on my 3-month trip was actually my drone. I own a DJI Mini 2, and I decided that for this trip it wasn't actually going to be beneficial for me to bring it with me. And there's a few reasons for that. Firstly, I was going to many different countries that all have very different drone laws, some way more relaxed than others. And it was just going to be a little bit of a hassle in some of those places to be able to film or even just take the drone through the airport. I decided that I'd actually leave it at home and just focus on kind of shooting with my main gear. The other thing I didn't bring with me was a lot of my kind of cinema gear. I decided to not bring my camera cage, my monitor, and some of the other things that were going to add extra bulk to my gear. The main reason for that is that the bigger your camera looks in many of these destinations, the more likely you are to have people ask you if you're filming professionally or if you have a license. Sure, in the middle of New Zealand, no one is going to ask you that question, but in some other places that I wanted to be able to film, people might question whether I was allowed to or not. So when you are traveling all day, it's additional weight that you have to carry. My bag already weighed I think over 12 kilos, and that's my rucksack. So I really did not need any extra weight. Now let's talk about what was actually in the kit. First thing to talk about is, of course, the camera body. For those of you who've been watching the channel for a little while will know that I have been using the Sony A7IV, and I've been using the Sony A7IV for all of my photo and video content over the last 15 months or so, and it has been absolutely phenomenal. And it was brilliant when I was out traveling on this trip because it was the perfect camera that would be able to capture both photo content, which I've always enjoyed doing, even if it's not for any sort of commercial work. It's just a passion of mine. Also be able to capture fantastic video in all of the places I could go. Having that in one camera body was really key. It's a small, fairly lightweight body, but it has many features that have really helped me be able to capture this content on this trip. Notably, obviously the flip screen is fantastic for when you're filming in scenarios where you need to get down low. It's also built really well. We spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia where it was very humid. We also just got so much rain at times, held up brilliantly. It honestly looks brand new. Pretty crazy to say because I've put this camera through some pretty rough conditions. If you're looking to do this type of thing where you go traveling, it's so versatile. It takes fantastic photos. The video is phenomenal. It was the perfect camera to take with me on this trip. If you want to learn a little bit more about my thoughts about this camera, I do have an entire review about it that I made just before I left on this trip. So do go and check that out if you want to learn a little bit more about the Sony A7IV. Let's talk about what's attached to the front of this camera, and that is the Sony 20mm f1.8. And I made a video about this while I was away, but this lens is absolutely phenomenal. It's a fantastic lens for travel filmmaking or filmmaking in general. I think the 20mm focal length is a little bit different to what a lot of people are shooting on at the moment. 24 is very popular. The 24mm f1.4 G Master is a very popular lens, but I picked up the 20mm before I left on this trip, and I honestly have fallen in love with it. It's just a great focal length for capturing wide scenes, but also that kind of more vlog style casual content because you've got a great wide field of view. This lens is really compact, which is important for this kit. I didn't want to carry around anything that was going to be really big, hefty, or like cumbersome to carry around. So the fact that it is so small is brilliant. I love that it's got a manual aperture ring, it's got a customizable button, which is great. Overall, the performance of the lens is absolutely fantastic. The only other lens that I brought with me on this trip was the Sony A7IV f1.8, which was my last review. I have been using this lens non-stop again over this travel period. It's been my kind of longer lens throughout this period, and it was fantastic. Performed really, really well. I think it's a versatile lens. 85 is quite tight, so in some of those city scenarios, you're looking to use something a little bit wider like the 20mm. Both of these lenses individually are really great lenses, but together they pair fantastically to give you a nice range of different shots. Both prime 1.8 lenses meant they're great in low light. I shot quite a few scenes in darker conditions, which was really helpful to have lenses that had fast apertures. Really great versatile kit between these two lenses. Now in front of my lenses I had a couple of different filters which I used in different scenarios. This one, as you can see, is a variable ND. This is essentially used to darken down your images when it's quite bright out. I did quite a lot of shooting during kind of the middle of the day, which is not ideal shooting conditions, but considering we were out and about and I was just shooting tons and tons of stuff, it was important to be able to dim down those highlights, just be able to get a proper exposure. I use this variable ND from Earth. I don't think I would recommend it though, because this one is currently a bit broken. So this didn't last me the entire trip. Unfortunately, it's still usable, but it kind of has gone past the limit where the max point is. And so you do get a little bit of vignetting in the corners, which is quite frustrating. I'm gonna need to get myself a new one. There's a couple of step-up rings on this filter, which I now can't take off. That's a little bit of a pain, but that was part of my kit. I will be changing to a different filter. Maybe I'll make a video on that or update you on my Instagram stories to show you what I pick up. The other filter that I did bring with me, and I had on particularly quite a lot at the start of the trip in Southeast Asia, is this, which is a Cinesoft filter. It looks essentially clear to the eye, but this Cinesoft filter allows me, it's essentially a mist filter. It blooms your highlights, makes everything, it gives everything kind of a dreamy look, which is a look that I particularly enjoy in my films, and it just worked really well in the Southeast Asia kind of streets. In Vietnam, it was just fantastic. It just gave the whole thing a really interesting look, and because there's so many neon lights and interesting things going on, it just worked so well. This basically never left my camera for that first part of the trip. Quickly, let's talk about something a little bit less exciting, but of course it's necessary. My SD cards. I run two 128 gig SD cards, one which is used for my photo stuff, which is a slightly slower card. I don't need such a quick card, particularly when you're doing travel photography. It's not particularly fast paced. And then I have a faster Lexar 300 megabytes per second card. You do need some fairly quick cards that are unfortunately not very cheap, but they are necessary nonetheless. These cards have been reliable during my whole time using them, which has been good, because the last thing you want is storage breaking on you, because that's very frustrating. Let's talk about audio. And as you can see, this is a recent pickup of mine. I picked this up just before we left on this trip, which is the DJI mics. DJI mics. I always say DJI. Everyone else says it's DJI. Anyway, the DJI mics are fantastic. I've absolutely loved these. I'm probably going to do a review on them to give you my full thoughts, but in a summary, these little microphones, I'm using one to record the audio for this video right now. There's another one in here, which was great because I could then attach it onto Emma and then she could chat. It comes in this lovely little charging case, which is a nice compact way of keeping everything together, because that's the other thing when you're going from place to place, the last thing you want to do is lose stuff. Especially with this kit, I've managed to keep everything together, which is obviously great. Sound quality is fantastic. Really great set of audio mics for a travel setup just like this one. Okay, and finally, as you can see, I wasn't running a gimbal of any sort. It's just one of those things that's too heavy and hefty to carry around. It's not necessary in a trip like this, but I did carry around my Peak Design slide lights strap. Having a camera strap is often overlooked when it comes to filmmaking, but I think it's quite useful to have as you walk around. I also do have the Peak Design capture clip, which is the little base plate and the clip that goes onto my bag. That's another great way to carry your camera around as you go around. But having a strap particularly just ensures the safety of your camera a little bit more as you're traveling, but also stops you from dropping it if you're in a numpty. It's a good little strap. I've had that for several years now and it's been incredibly reliable. So there we go. That's my little compact travel setup. Of course, there are more elements to it, like my laptop, my SSDs and stuff like that, but I'm gonna make a whole different video about my full camera setup at the moment. This makes up quite a large majority of it, keeping it nice and compact, being able to be versatile. It's a setup that worked really well for me. Maybe I could have had a third lens in there for an extra focal length, but it's then more things to carry around. So you kind of need to consider the pros and cons of each item you bring when you're traveling, especially when you're traveling for quite a long time like we were. Nonetheless, really enjoyed using this setup. I'm going to continue using most of this stuff as I go forward for all my other work. Let me know if there are any recommendations for other bits and bobs I could have brought or alternatives. Let me know. What do you think? Did I choose wisely? Go over to my Instagram, check it out as well. There's some videos that I've already created with this kit if you are interested in checking them out. Thanks for spending a little bit of your time with me this week. If you want to do it on a weekly basis, hit that subscribe button. Come and join the little community of filmmakers and creators we've got going on down here. I'd really appreciate it. And make sure you come around this time next week. Right, see you there.